All right, welcome back to Waste Some Time with Jason Green. I am Jason Green, bringing you brand new interviews right here on YouTube. Make sure you subscribe. Click on the link for Patreon in the description, and you'll be able to ask questions of our guests. A few of our Patrons asked some questions for today's show. Today, Brian Wheat of Tesla is here. I'm a big fan of Tesla, have been for a long time. Brian has a book out called Son of a Milkman, and he also, with the band Tesla, will be performing their first residency here in Las Vegas this March. I'm excited to see it. I want to know a little bit more about it. I want to know what's going on with Tesla. So we will talk about all those things and more with Brian Wheat right after this. Just wanna waste some time with you. Sometimes it seems too good to be true. Nobody out there to waste time with that. Right, here he is, Brian Wheat.
Hey, Jason, what's happening, man?
It's good to see you, Brian. I'm really excited. You know, I missed you when you were out promoting the book. When the COVID pandemic started, you were really pushing the book. My show was still new at that point, and I said I got to have Brian on here at some point, and so I'm glad you're here today.
Oh, thanks. Good to be here, man.
I will start with some of my earliest Tesla memories. Sometimes stories don't have to have a point. my good friend, when I was younger, he was a huge Def Leppard fan. He saw Def Leppard and Tesla, and he went home and said, "This band is amazing. You've got to check out this band, Tesla." I bet a lot of people discovered Tesla for the first time on that Hysteria tour.
Oh yeah, tons. Yeah, that was a huge tour for us.
Massive, massive.
And I think we were on it for close to almost a year on and off. And yeah, I mean, you know, look, without Def Leppard, I don't know that we'd be sitting here today. You know, me and you, they were very instrumental in breaking of Tesla, you know, with that tour and stuff.
Yeah, and Tesla had the goods. A lot of bands could get a good spot on a tour. It doesn't mean you're going to win over that crowd, especially a Def Leppard crowd on a highly anticipated album. And Tesla made their mark on that audience.
Yeah. I mean, you know, the funny thing is we used to, when me and Frank first started playing, we used to do all these Def Leppard songs. Mm-hmm. And, you know, that was only 4 years before that tour. And, you know, when we started in the garage and stuff, and 4 years later, we're on tour with Def Leppard. So who'd have known? It was pretty cool. They were like kind of a good model for what we were doing. You know, we were a 5-piece band with a singer and 2 guitar players. So a lot of, you know, some of this early stuff, I mean, even if you listen to like Song and Emotion, it sounds like Def Leppard, you know, because they were a big influence on us. And I think we've said it a lot. So I can't say that we have never said it, but it's always good to say because they're like big brothers to us.
And Joe Elliott wrote the foreword for your book. You guys have continued a strong friendship.
Yeah. Joe's probably one of my best friends from a rock band, him and Phil both. And when we started, me and Joe bonded, and he kind of took me under his wing, and it's like my big brother. We kind of joke about, you know, him. He doesn't have a brother, so I'm kind of like his adopted little brother. And you know, he busts my ass. He'll give it to me straight. And I like that about Joe. Joe's always been really super cool, and he's never changed. You know, I've known Joe since Hysteria, and he's the same Joe today as he was then. So it's really cool.
I heard a funny story about you and Frank were sharing rooms back then. It was a different time. And you thought maybe you were making too much racket. You know, someone knocked on the door. You guys thought, oh, man, it's got to be security. And tell me.
Yeah, it was Joe Elliott. He was in the room next to us. We were up in Lake Placid doing rehearsals for the In the Round tour. And he was in the room next to us. And he heard me and Frank. And he came over. And that was kind of the night me and Joe bonded because we had done the English part of that tour, and I never spoke to Joe. Matter of fact, I thought Joe didn't even like us because we hung out with Clarkey and Phil Collin and Rick Allen mostly on that English tour. We never spoke to Joe once. And then we were in rehearsals in Lake Placid, and he knocked on the door, and like, oh, hey, he's like, hey, what are you guys doing? Can I come in? I'm like, yeah, come on in. And then we started singing these Paul McCartney songs, Paul McCartney and Wings, because me and Joe Elliott love Paul McCartney and Wings, and that was kind of the night we bonded, and we've been buddies ever since that night.
Yeah, what a great thing. In rock and roll, it's hard to have rock and roll friendships. People live in different parts of the world. The people go on tour. People change. People get married. People.
Yeah, they're kind of superficial. I mean, we're peers, right? All of us, but actual real friendships, because you're always somewhere else, and you go on tour with this band for 6 months, and this. But me and Joe Elliott have always maintained this really, real friendship. And like I said, Joe and Phil Collin, both those guys, have always been super, more than just peers that are in bands,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. So that was my first exposure to Tesla. My friend gives me the cassette, and I love it, and I'm totally into it. And so my friend and my cousin and I decide we're going to go to Nassau Coliseum in New York City to see Tesla open for Poison. My friends did not want to see Poison. They just wanted to see Tesla. This was not like Def Leppard for them. They were just there for Tesla. So we didn't know. We lived in Manhattan. We thought, oh, how far could Long Island be? And we set out on a night, one of those nights from hell that everyone has a story. The Detroit Rock City movie sort of reminded me of what that night was like. We were taking trains and buses and taxi cabs, and then we were told there's no way out, no pun intended. After you leave, you're going to have to spend the night on the street. And so we left so early. We were so excited to see Tesla, and we tried to do the Long Island Railroad, and everything was going wrong. And when we got to Nassau Coliseum, you walk in and it looks like, the amount of hairspray, everything that people see in the videos. I'm telling people who are younger, maybe weren't there. It was crazy. It looked like you were at a Poison concert in Long Island in 1989, 90. And we walk in and we thought, well, the night was hell, but at least we're going to see Tesla. And we literally walked in and the lights went up and they said, thank you, good night, and my friends were so mad that they had to sit through Poison. And we said, we're going to make up for this. We are going to make sure that we see Tesla. Well, it turns out you did the 5-man acoustical jam. Most people might not realize that it was more than just the show that made the record. You did it in New York City.
You saw the Ritz.
So I saw the Ritz, which was Studio 54 back in the day. Legendary spot, and in New York was really a place to go. My friends and I are walking up the street, and we see you outside talking to fans casually. And I remember the impact that my friends had, that my girlfriend at the time had, saying, "Well, this guy is a cool guy. He's hanging out with people, and he's just like everybody else." And it gave us another good reinforcement about Tesla. And went to the show. That show was incredible.
That was the best one of the 5.
You didn't record it though, right?
Somewhere there's a bootleg, and I remember Don Dokken got up and jammed with us.
That's right.
But there is a bootleg of that. But the reason that the 5-man acoustic jam album is Philadelphia is that's the place we brought the mobile truck to and stuff.
Right.
That was not the best performance, but it had a vibe. And I always say that about that record. It sonically, it doesn't sound fantastic or anything, but there's something about the vibe of that. And it's one of the things that I'm most proud of Tesla, is that we can do that. We can sit there and do that thing acoustic. And not a lot of people can do it, and we do it pretty convincingly. And it was just a gift. I don't know, we didn't set out to do it. We actually, our manager, Peter Minch, kind of challenged us into doing it, because what happened was we had won Best Metal Album for Great Radio Controversy. We're from Northern California, and they had this San Francisco Bay Area Music Awards. They had this magazine they used to have called BAM magazine, and we won a BAMmy for the best metal thing. So it was right after we had played with Poison, We didn't have our gear. It was still on a truck, so they wanted us to play. So we just happened to play Love Song acoustic that night, right? We worked it up like 2 days before at Frank's house or something. And this woman saw us play that acoustic, and she wrote our manager at the time, Peter Mensch, a letter saying, you know, would this band come and play I Own This Club with Boz Skaggs, a full set, 90-minute set. So when Peter asked us, we said, no, we don't want to do that. It's not rock and roll. You know, that was just, you know, one thing. He said, well, I bet you're not good enough to pull it off. Well, that's all he had to do to say to us. And that's how that kind of came about. So then we worked that up. And then what happened was we were on tour with Motley Crue on Dr. Feelgood. And they were playing maybe 4 shows a week. And at that time, Tesla needed to play 5 or 6 days a week just to make our nut, you know, because, you know, we weren't, you know, headliners or anything. And we said, well, let's do a couple of these acoustic shows in the off days to cover the expenses, and it'd be kind of cool. And so there was 5 of them. There's Detroit, London, New York, Philadelphia, and Boston. And actually the best show of the bunch was actually London. The best show in America was the Ritz. So anyways, I'm sorry, a bit long-winded, but.
Oh, no. I think it's interesting. I remember that night, though, whoever was, you know, on the East Coast, the bands, Trickster and these type of, everybody had to be there. I remember Warrant was in town. They were there. It was a thing that everybody wanted to see. And while Unplugged was a thing on MTV, you guys really took it to a further step than any of these bands that played, you know, 2 or 3 acoustic songs. You guys did the set. And I think, and you could let us know, but it added life to Tesla. In that time, when Signs comes out, here's a whole new crowd that discovers Tesla.
Yeah, no, it's, you know, I think it's probably the one thing when, you know, they write that book on, you know, rock and roll or whatever, that one sentence we'll get in that book, when they talk about Tesla, they'll talk about the 5-man acoustic jam. You know, even though, you know, we're this working man's blues-based rock and roll band, you know, real organic, you know, no pretentious, no bullshit, straight up rock and roll band. I think what I've seen over the, you know, I'm going on 37 years now. Can you believe that?
It's crazy.
That's the one thing that everyone always talks about is this acoustic live album. And that was the thing that Jimmy Page said to me. One of the coolest things the first time I met him. He said, you know, you're the first band that ever did a live acoustic album. Because some people say, oh, you started this acoustic thing. We didn't. You know, I can't take credit for that. I mean, you know, Jimmy was doing acoustic sets. Peter Frampton was doing acoustic sets. Paul McCartney and Wings was doing acoustic sets, you know, on the Wings of America. But he said, you're the first one that did a whole live album that way. And that is true. Then, you know, you had Nirvana and Rod Stewart and all these other people do the live albums after that. But, so I guess that's the one thing that maybe they'll write a sentence about us.
Yeah, and you did it a little different. You played songs like Coming At You Live acoustic. At the time, people were surprised to hear the heavy songs.
Yeah, no, we kind of really changed that one up. And Before My Eyes, we really changed up. And, you know, the version of Paradise, I prefer that was kind of like the original way I envisioned that song being on Great Radio Controversy. But I had to fight like tooth and nail to get that song on the album. No one in the band, but I think me and Jeff wanted that song on the album. You know, and I was like, you know, look, I always envisioned it kind of as an acoustic or a piano thing, you know, more like the Golden Slumbers, like the Beatles or something. Not like, you know, I guess on Great Radio they tried to turn it into like a Love to Love or a Bohemian Rhapsody, something big production thing, you know. I always envisioned it stripped down, and so. You know, yeah, we did do some things differently that I thought were really cool. And you know, even to this day, when we get together and we work on acoustic stuff, you know, it's kind of real natural for us.
Yeah, and like, you know, you sort of it became a niche, and for that band, people expect it. And what's funny is I think there's some people who were turned on to the acoustic stuff who didn't realize how heavy Tesla was. That those albums have a lot of heavy tunes on them.
Well, it's funny because some people, you know, they thought Signs was our song, and that was their first exposure to that, because that's our biggest selling album. And then the funny thing about it is, after that record, right? So we had this massive hit with Signs. The first single to come off Psychotic Supper is one of the heaviest songs we ever did, which was Edison's Medicine. So we completely threw them another curveball, like, woo, you know, and you know, and I'm proud of that we didn't like try to come out with Signs #2 off the back of having a hit on Signs, you know, because believe me, they were trying to get us to do that, and they did do that to us on Bust a Nut. That song Games People Play that's on Bust a Nut, that wasn't our thing. That was the record company pushing us to try to have another Signs. And I hate that fucking song. I don't hate Joe Stouse's version of it, right?
Yeah.
I hate that they forced us into doing that. That's not what we wanted to do. You know?
It changes the direction of what you wanted.
Yeah, they kind of, we didn't have a hit on that album, and well, we want you to do this cover, and kind of pushed us into it. And then, you know, obviously, you know, after that album, it's kind of like when we spiraled up out of control. Therefore, you know, Tommy left and all that stuff happened. That wasn't a great period of Tesla busting out. It had some really cool songs on it, but we were fucked up, unraveling at the seams at that point.
As was everybody, you know, obviously at that point.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, you know, I'm not one to dwell on hindsight or, you know, we should have did this. Everything happened for a reason, and I'm glad it happened, and I'm glad we broke up because we got back together and all that. But looking at it, I mean, you know, we were definitely unraveling, and, you know, I think the peak of that first part of our career was Psychotic Supper. I think at that point we were like, that record, all of us were firing on all cylinders. And, you know, it's just funny because when I sit there and I think about, you know, I'm 60, and that was, you know, we're going on 38 years or something. And you look back on it, it doesn't really seem like it was that long ago, but it was.
Yeah, time can sometimes fly, especially when you're writing your book and you're probably thinking about these memories. Before we get into that, I got to ask you, Les Emerson, the guy who writes the song Signs originally, do they ever reach out to you and thank you for making them a whole?
No. Jeff became friends with them. You know, Les died, and Jeff went to this memorial thing and sang and stuff. Yeah, no, he came to a few shows, and him and Jeff actually became pretty good buddies. You know, Jeff was the one that wanted to do that song. I mean, the thing with that record is we each picked a cover. So I picked We Can Work It Out, obviously, being the Beatle freak. On the 8th day God created Paul McCartney, that I am. Tommy picked Mother's Little Helper, Stones. Frank picked The Truckin' Thing. Troy picked Lodi, and Jeff was the one that wanted to do Signs. So we met Les a few times. He was a nice guy.
Yeah, I whenever I have somebody on, Great White, you know, for example, boy, you guys made someone a lot of money off Once Bitten, Twice Shy, Ian Hunter, and there's so many of those things.
Yeah, no, Les was happy that we did. Trust me.
Yeah, all of a sudden you wake up and you go to the mailbox. Wait a second, you know that song that I've forgotten about.
I keep waiting for someone to do one of our songs, you know, like that.
Yes, you're waiting for your check. Yeah,
I'm gonna be waiting a long time though.
You're waiting for your check. I want to talk anyway. Like I was saying, I was such a big fan of Tesla, and after my crazy experiences, I've gotten to see you guys so many times. I was fortunate just to see you recently in Key West, Florida. The band is sounding great. Everything.
Oh, you were at the thing the other day?
Yeah, I guess a couple of weeks now.
Why didn't you come back and say hi?
You know, you guys seem very private. I said I'm not going to bother them.
Well, we are. I mean, I understand, and But if you would have got a hold of me, I remember seeing you at the Stephen Piercy thing. It would have been no big deal.
Yeah, we did well because Piercy went on a little earlier, and I made sure to stick around and check you out. But
Yeah, no, I would have loved to see you. I didn't know you were there.
well, Vegas, I'm coming to every show. I'm ready. But you have to explain to me now. Tell me, no one really has heard too much about this Vegas residency yet. What are the
Well,
plans?
I'll tell you what's happening. So they reached out to us about doing a residency, and we said, okay, okay. We were a little apprehensive because 5 shows in Vegas, I didn't know we'd be able to do it, honestly, and they've all done extremely well, and I think the whole thing is going to be sold out. But long story short, we're doing this residency in Vegas in September. I mean, March. Yeah, and I think the thing of it is we're gonna each night it's gonna be a little bit different set. You're gonna have the core songs that you're gonna listen. You're gonna play Signs every night. You're gonna play Love Song every night. You're gonna play Cowboy every night. But because we've got 11 albums or 12 albums, we're gonna throw each night will be one night will be more geared towards Mechanical Resonance, right? Then one night will be more geared towards Great Radio Controversy. One night will be geared towards Psychotic Supper. One night will be geared towards 5-Man Acoustic Jam. And then, so it's kind of going to be a mix of a lot of things combined with, the core hits that you would expect us to do.
Which is what makes it exciting, I think, for a fan. And I think, Vegas is filled with residencies of, Aerosmith and Elton John. Right. You guys are sort of setting hopefully a future trend here by doing this. And I think, as you were saying, it's not the kind of show you go see once, because if you're a Tesla fan, you're going to want to see these different
Well,
sets.
if you've seen all 5, you're going to see a different show every night.
Yeah, and that's a rare thing. It's March 17th through the 25th. Tickets are on sale now. We have a link in the description. I tell people, don't sleep on your favorite bands. Don't say I'll see them next time. Everyone travels a long way to get to one show. Well, now we've got a residency here in Vegas. You'd like to see more. You want to see your favorite bands. Get out there and support and have a good time. We lost a few years. We all did. Now's the chance for people to see live music and to see you guys do something that really hasn't been done in Vegas on this level. So I think it's going to be an exciting show. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, we're real excited about it. We are very excited about it. I mean, the end of this month, I actually go to Sacramento because now I live in upstate New York, and Frank and Jeff and Dave are in Sacramento and Steve. So I'll go there and I think we got 10 days of rehearsal. Mm-hmm. So we're putting a lot of, effort into that residency and stuff. And we're looking forward to it.
Yeah. You're in the Syracuse area, right?
Yeah. I live in a little town called Auburn, New York, in the Finger Lakes, which is about 20 miles from Syracuse. And Jason Newstead lives about 4 miles from me. He lives in this little village, Skinny Alice. But the one guy that lives here is Joey DeMaio, who's from Manowar. Yeah. He's like my big brother. He's like the Godfather. And, when I came here, he brought me a case of wine. What a top-notch class act Joey DeMaio is. I've never seen his band. I'm going to go see him in Turkey this year. So he's on tour right now in Europe. And I have the time off, and me and my wife are going to go to Istanbul because he's headlining a big festival there. And I'm going to finally get to see him play. So, he's cool. I like Auburn. It's cool. I don't like the winters here.
Yeah. What made you go there?
I bought this house. I like old architecture. And, I'm from Sacramento. I lived there till about 6 years ago. So my whole life was spent in Sacramento. And I lived in this house from 1894. this Victorian house. And Sacramento has just changed, and California's changed, and without getting into it or whatever, it was just time to leave. So I left for a bunch of reasons, and I went to Texas, where you can get an amazing house, very inexpensively. The cost of living is expensive. The people there are great. But what I didn't realize, what came with this beautiful 1890s Victorian place in Texas, is it came with its own private rattlesnake farm and tornadoes and hailstorms. So one of my Jack Russells got killed by a rattlesnake, died in my wife's arms. And that was like 6 weeks after I got to Texas. Well, that was the end of Texas. It took me 2 more years to get out of there, but emotionally and everything, that was it. So I found this really cool old mansion here in Auburn that was Senator John Dulas's house, from Dulles Airport in Washington, D.C. And there's this crazy, ridiculous price on it that the place is just magical. So that's what brought me up here, and the fact that they didn't have rattlesnakes and my dogs could roam freely and not, be worried about it. But I didn't realize the winters were so cold here. Like last week, it was minus 17.
Oh boy.
So we've kind of inherited another house in Florida for my wife's family. So the winters now will be spent in Florida, and the other 9 months out of the year will be in upstate here in New York, in the Finger Lakes.
Yeah. It's a beautiful area. I'm from New York City originally, so I know the season issues there. I was out there with Stephen Piercy and Tommy Skeo's band Resistant Bite opening that night. Tommy's been on the show a bunch of times. He's a great personality, but it was so nice to see you there watching his band and supporting and seeing you guys talking like old friends. It's a great thing.
It's funny because, it's all been pretty well documented, what's happened with Tommy and Tesla and stuff. And I love Tommy, first and foremost. When I think about all the great body of work we have together, I love the guy. Unfortunately, because I'm the one guy in the band that is vocal and stuff, I maybe got targeted by him to take his anger out on, and him targeting me. And I'm not a passive guy. I targeted him, and it really wasn't how we both felt. But unfortunately, it'd been, since 2006, we hadn't talked. And, he had talked to Jeff, but he hadn't talked to myself or Frank. And I think he had seen Troy. So I had all these weird feelings about Tommy, but when I think about anytime Tommy was in the band, or even when he came back in 2000 to 2006, he lived with me in Monique when he was in Sacramento, So long story short, what happened was I got on this cruise, this boat, this Monsters Rock thing, and I do my artwork. And I found out he was going to be on there, and I was a bit apprehensive. I'm like, I don't know how that's going to go, Mm-hmm. For the last 10 years, we've been slagging each other in interviews and stuff. And he's the first person I ran into when I got on the boat, going to my room. I look up, and there he is, and he just smiled at me. And all that shit just went away. And, he looked at me, and I looked at him, and he stuck out his hand to shake it. And I said, fuck that, give me a hug. And it was just all gone. So we hung out on the boat a little bit, and then I found out he was coming here. So me and my wife went to see him. It was his birthday the other day. I was on texting with him the other day. I think he turned 61. It was the 5th. But I have a lot of love for Tommy Steele, and I'm really proud of him. I'm really happy that what he's doing with Resistant Bite, he's writing the kind of songs he's capable of, right? Because Tommy's a great songwriter, and some of that stuff he was doing when he was on his own, wasn't it's like, come on, dude, you wrote Song and Emotion, you wrote Heaven's Trail, and he's back to writing that caliber stuff. So I'm really pleased with how he's doing.
Yeah, it's when I had him on the show for the first time, you get all these warnings. Don't ask him about this. Don't ask him about that.
Right.
But Tommy was willing to talk about anything, and he doesn't hide his addictions or his faults. And he and part of growing, but he doesn't want to be known as just that person. And most of the time, you do an interview, and the first thing is, "So, are you on drugs? Are you clean?"
I think he's doing really well, and he smiles a lot now. He's a lot more happier. I see him on Facebook and some of the goofy shit he does. When he talks and stuff. Listen, it was really good for my soul for me and him not to be where we are now, and I'm glad. And I'm the last guy. Like Eddie asked me last year, Eddie Trunk, when I was doing interviews for the book, do you ever think you'll be friends with Tommy Skeoch again? I went, fuck no. Why would I want to do that? And after that, I thought, well, that was kind of harsh. But, that's this defense thing you get into, right? And I'm really glad that we're friends again. And one day again, I want to play with him one day again, I don't know when or where or how or whatever, but I'm very pleased with what's going on with him, and I'm pulling for him, and it wouldn't have happened without Tommy. I'm not going to erase him. You know what I mean? And I tried to, just because that's what you do when me and him are both hard-headed, stubborn. We both have pride, and fuck you, no, fuck you, no, fuck you. You know what I mean? And you can't erase. No, he was there. He was always on the same page with us until he wasn't, and he got sidetracked, and he seems to be back on the right track. So I'm really happy for him.
It sounds cliche when people say life is short, but there's nothing cliche about it.
It is fucking short. Listen, man, Jeff Beck died the other day. We're all getting older, and it's like there's no time, for fussing and fighting, my friends. We can work it out, not, but I'm just being funny. But honestly, it's like, we're too old,
You guys got to go to a Civil War reenactment together. Tommy loves the Civil War.
Well, he loves the Civil War. I like World War II. I'm a big World War II and World War One. And that's the thing I said to him. I said, all this time I never knew that you were into that stuff, and I was into it. And, we have a lot more in common than we probably even know or knew or what anyone would think. They've always thought that me and him were just like two adversaries. It's like, but it's not. What people see on social media or in the media or whatever isn't necessarily what is real and what the truth is.
Well, and it's out of context sometimes.
Yeah, with me and him, we're fine. We're good. We text a lot. I hope to see him. I hear he's coming up here playing in Niagara Falls, and if I'm off, I'll go see him play. And but I enjoyed that night when I saw you when I was there with him.
Yeah, it was like seeing old friends. Like nothing had changed. It was really good. And
it's not. Nothing has to. I mean, it's like we're brothers. I mean, that I know it sounds corny and cliche, but truth of the matter is those guys in Tesla. I've spent 36 years with those guys. 37 years. I mean, Frank been together since he was 15 years old. You know what I mean? They're more my brothers than my maternal family, blood brothers. We've experienced all this shit together, and we grew together. We had good times, bad times, all that shit together, and you can't take that away.
Yeah, no, absolutely not. You sort of set it up for the segue about Troy Luccketta. Troy's took some time off a couple of years back, sort of at the beginning of the pandemic. What can you say about that? Do you know if he's coming back?
No, he's not coming back. I don't know. I don't think he's going to come back. And it's just, he wants time off. He wanted time off, and sometimes people just do things like that. You start out like this, and it just grows apart. And I think, that we've we've probably come to a point in our professional relationship that we've just grown too far apart on things. And look, I love Troy. He's my brother, just like Tommy Skio's my brother. Will we play together again? I don't know. Probably one day, yeah. I mean, listen, look, I'm the kind of guy that, and I know this is going to sound funny to anyone, and I'll go ahead and say it, but, and I haven't even said this to Frank and Jeff or Dave or anybody, but when there's one last lap around the track for this band, right? I think we owe it to our fans that everyone plays together. And I'm not saying Tommy without Dave. I'm saying Dave and Tommy, right? And probably and Troy too, if he would be up for it. And go out with class and dignity and style and say, okay, listen, we've been through a few changes. This is that. We're going to do 40 more shows or whatever that is, right? And not, turn that into a 5-year tour or anything, But as I sit here today, and that could change, Jason, and I'm sure Blabbermouth's going to be all over this tomorrow and say Brian Lee wants to put the original band back together. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying when there's one last lap left, and we all know there's one last lap, I'm the one guy that will stand up in the room and say, I'd like us all to go do it all together. If that means having 2 drummers and 3 guitar players and Jeff Keith, I'm in. Now, I can't speak for the rest of the band. This is me speaking. Mm-hmm. I'm that guy that would like to do that. So, Blabbermouth, if you're out there, don't fucking misquote me.
Right.
Because that's all you ever do.
I think your audience and your fans would love it too.
I think we owe it to them. You know what I mean? I mean, they've been such a loyal and diehard fan base. I think they would love the fact that we went out like that. If that's how we're going to go out, that's how we would do it.
Yeah. Not to push you too much on the Troy issue, but was it that it was traveling too much for him? What makes him say, I don't want to do it?
The bottom line is we wanted to go out and he said he didn't. And after, being off for, 18 months with COVID, we had to go out. We couldn't just sit home. We're not independently wealthy guys. We make our living from playing concerts. We work. That's our job. We were never fortunate enough to have a hysteria or a pyromania or an appetite or a slippery when wet or a black album or a back in black. We quietly would sell 1 million, 1.5 million records. And we've got this diehard fan base. And every year we have to go out and earn our living. So we couldn't sit home. And that's where, it came to the thing. And he had his reasons and I respect that. And we just decided we were going to continue to go out and play.
Yeah, I saw Steve Brown play with you guys in Key West. He did a great job. Nice guy. Also, he's the younger brother of Mick Brown from Docking. Yeah. And he's a great drummer. He did a great job. And I think that the other people on the package, the drummers that I know that were on it with our bands, all really enjoyed it as well. And it felt like
he's a great guy. He's happy to be there. He plays fucking great. He's really a super guy and a super great drummer. He's easy to be around. And I love Steve Brown. He's a great guy.
Yeah, a great addition.
Steve Brown, the drummer, not Steve Brown from Trickster.
That's right. There is some confusion. Yes.
Yeah, but I saw him too, and he's a great guy. But I've known Steve since he was 16, I think. That's Steve.
Yeah, he was at the that 5-man acoustical show. I remember. So I want to get some viewer questions. I don't keep you all day. I know you.
I'm all right, dude. I'm in my new studio. I'm building. People are working. I'm just chilling.
Perfect. Good. I'm glad.
You got as much time as you want, bro.
Thank you, Brian. Okay, so question from Brian Kirk, and he would like to know how you got hooked up with the Wentworth Gallery to show your art, and how long have you been an artist? Well, you've been an artist. And
Well, how I got hooked up with the Wentworth Gallery was really from Larry Moran, who does the Monsters of Rock cruise. We were on that cruise, and we've done one, every year or whatever. And one of my best friends is Ross Halfin, the photographer. Okay, so I go around a lot with Ross when I'm not on tour with Tessa or whatever, and we go to all these places, and he takes pictures everywhere he goes. And he handed me this little Leica camera one day, and I started taking pictures. And he went, "You got a pretty good eye, Brian." I don't know shit about photography outside of how to point it and focus it and go. So I started taking all these pictures about 2004, 2005, and so I had all these really cool pictures, and people said, "Oh, I really like your pictures. I really like your pictures. I really like your pictures." So I asked Larry, "Can we do an exhibit while we're doing one of these cruises, like Rick Allen's doing with his art?" And he said, "Well, let me put you in touch with Christian, who owns Wentworth Galleries, and see what he says." So I asked Christian, and Christian said, "I think your picture's really good, but I don't do pictures. I do art." And I said, "Okay." So the next day I was up getting a Starbucks or whatever on the boat, and I ran into him. He said, "Hey, I had to think about that last night. I have an idea. Let me know what you think." I said, "Sure, what is it?" He goes, "How do you feel about painting on your pictures?" And I went, "I don't paint. I'm not a painter. I just take photographs." He goes, "I bet you could do it." I said, "Well, what do you mean?" He said, like paint on the pictures." And so it took me a minute to kind of wrap my head around it. And he said, "Look, send me some of your pictures, some images. I'll print them on a bunch of different things, and we had metal, we had wood, we had canvas, we had paper, this, that, and the other." And he said, "Just experiment, enhance things, I said, "You mean like paint the flowers red that are red, or whatever?" He said, "Yeah, just mess with it." So I gravitated towards the canvas and acrylics because my wife, she took art classes and all that. So I had acrylics at the house and some brushes. So I started painting on my pictures. I print the image on a canvas and then paint, certain aspects of the picture. And that's how I became this artist, that does this thing with Wentworth. And through that, it's evolved. And I think we're going on our 6th or 7th year now. And I started doing bases and, stuff like that. And that's how that's how that came about.
Yeah, and we'll put a link in the description so people can check out your work. It's cool, and it is a different approach. And I think
Yeah, and it's fun, because it's for me, it's all creativity, whether it's writing songs or producing or mixing or engineering or painting or taking photographs. It's all, or designing rooms and building houses, all that. It's all in the book. I think I talk about in the book. It's like this just creative thing that I like to do, and I don't really think of myself like, "Hey, I'm an artist, man." You know what I mean?
right.
No, I'm just a guy that likes to experiment with whatever. I mean, I don't think of myself as a bass player. I think I'm a guy that plays the bass, not a bass player. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I just kind of do a lot of things and try to do them good. But
You got a lot of bass players in your neighborhood, I'll tell you that. It's a
Well,
it's a
there's
bass
3 of us. There's me, Joey DeMaio, and Jason Newstead.
and Jason Newsted. Yeah, no,
Yeah.
that's the bass area apparently now.
Yeah.
Question from Mark Sanchez, and a few people also expressed this. They wanted to know, any chance of new music from Soul Motor this year?
Yes. Finally, I finished the Soul Motor album, which I do about one every 8 to 10 years. And I'm going to release a single soon with a lyric video called Scarecrow Slim. And between, that and I've got 18 songs recorded and finished. And I'm just going to put singles out. And Darren, the lead singer, injured his foot. So at some point when he gets back healthy and stuff, I'll go out and probably do, a dozen, 15 shows in America with that band at some point when Tesla's not working. But yeah, I know I've been talking about it a long time, but the pandemic set me back. And then, because I was ready to put it out then, and then he injured his foot. So, but I'm definitely going to put out this single. And the second single is a song called Spider Baby, which both those will be coming out this year.
Yeah, well, that's good news. So you heard it here first. It's new music, and I think make a lot of people happy. Question that I have to ask is, your ex-wife Sandy Soraya. She was had a record out that was popular. Band was called Soraya. I saw them play in New York a ton of times too, the Ritz and those places. And obviously, you're remarried now. But a lot of people wonder what happened to Soraya. You posted a while back that you were going to possibly work with her on a third album. So what can you?
Yeah. I mean, me and her are great friends. Her and my wife are great friends. Me and her husband are great friends. I'm like Uncle Brian. Yeah, I mean, Sandy wants to sing again. You know, she's a mother. She's got 5 children. You know, they're all incredibly smart, and she's an amazing mother. And I think when she finds the time that she wants to do another record, I'll definitely do it with her if she wants me to do it, which she says she does. But she's been, you know, busy taking care of her family and stuff. But she can still sing as fucking great as she ever did, and she still looks the same. She hasn't aged at all. I mean,
That's great.
she looks incredible. So yeah, hopefully, you know, one day she'll do it. I'm waiting for her just to give me the green light, and we'll do it.
Yeah, people ask me on here sometimes for some of the more obscure people, and her name comes up from time to time. And I said, "There's no way that I could find her. You know, you can do all the Google searches you want. She's a private person for the most part."
Yeah, she's very private. She's very private. She, you know, she's very private about her family and stuff. But she's doing well. She's great.
Yeah, and I'm glad that this many years later you can still be friends. It's a good thing.
Oh, it took us quite a long time to be friends, but we're extremely close. She's one of the probably 3 most important people in my life, you know, between the guys in the band and my wife and her. I mean, you know, she's you know, I love Sandy. She's the best.
Yeah, that's a great. Oh, that's okay. Son of a Milkman, right here. This is the book. It's available everywhere right now. You know, sometimes these books come out during COVID or before COVID, and they sometimes get lost in the shuffle. The book is still available, and if people want to really see some great stories about Tesla, but your life otherwise, this is the book to check out. Son of a Milkman, My Crazy Life with Tesla. Crazy life it has been indeed. Brian, one of the things that I like about your book is how candid you are. Some people write a book, but they hold back. You didn't hold back. You talked about your life, and you talked about your struggles. And one of the things that a lot of people took from the book was that your struggle with bulimia. When you and it's always will be a struggle, I'm sure. But when you were in Tesla, you describe yourself as a fat kid before that, and as Tesla gets that MTV fame, you were making yourself throw up and trying to
maintain that look, you know, because it was so, that time was so image driven, you know. It was all about, you know, circus and hit parader and MTV and you know, so there was a lot of pressure, and I've always struggled with my weight. And, you know, I have this autoimmune disease.
Right.
And that recently, in the last 20 years, has wreaked havoc on my body, because the way they combat autoimmune disease is with prednisone, which is a steroid, which just blows you up. So I'm up and down, up and down, up and down, you know, depending on what my state is with my ulcerative colitis and my autoimmune. But yeah, I mean, when I wrote the book, I just figured, you know what? Because, you know, look, I'm human. I'm like anyone else. I surf the internet. I see when people talk shit about, you know, me or, you know, I feel bad like when people slag Vince Neil or they slag Axel or whatever. It's like, we're all human. We don't. No one likes to be, and people just say whatever the fuck they want on this internet. It's just, and 9 out of 10 times it's not even true, and people think it is. So I just got to a point where I was seeing a lot of shit, and I just went, you know what? Let me just address this, and people can hear it from my mouth. What this is. I mean, what, do you fucking really think I sit there and eat 26 fucking pieces of chocolate cake and I want to go on stage looking bloated? It's I have to if I'm on the prednisone, and it goes up and down, and that's how it is. And if you can't dig it, fuck off. And if you can dig it, well, cool. Then you can kind of maybe relate to what I'm going through. And if you're somebody, that's going through the same thing, maybe you can relate. And that's why I did the book. Was a lot of, I mean, it would have been easy to do like just a Tesla book, my life in Tesla. But the stuff when I talked about my anxiety and depression and the bulimia and the fact that I was an illegitimate kid and all the shit that I talk about is like for the other people who may be going through the same thing. And then they can go, well, hey, man, this guy, he can talk about it, because very cathartic doing that. It's very much, it's like a weight's being lifted off your chest when you just say, hey, look, here it is. This is what it is. There you go. Do with it what you want, but you're not hiding it or holding it in. So that was kind of the reason I was so candid in that book about that.
Yeah, I can imagine. Yeah. Especially with something like bulimia, I think a lot of people think of teenage girls and supermodels, and they don't realize that, you can be a grown man struggling with that issue just as much.
You'd be amazed at how many dudes during that time period that were in rock bands that were doing the same fucking thing. You know what I mean? I mean, I heard about it from a dude that was in a rock band. I'm not going to say who it was, and no, it wasn't Joe Elliott, but you know what I mean? Yeah, I mean, because we all had to maintain that look, or you weren't being played on MTV, or you know what I mean? Whatever the case was back then.
Yeah, absolutely. And then as far as now, I have a family member who's dealing with the same thing you're dealing with, the autoimmune and the prednisone, the same exact. And it's a hard thing. It's a hard emotionally and obviously physically. And I think it's something for you to say, this is what I look like. This is why. This is my appearance. And I'm the same guy. I still play the same music. I'm still here. Right. And I think it is, the book is inspiring to other people who may be in those situations. And I think that it takes guts, though, for you to do it.
Yeah, it's, you got to have balls of steel, because, people say a lot of shit. It's like today, someone was slagging Vince off. There was some bullshit thing about how he'd been at some all-you-can-eat buffet. And it's like, it's utter bullshit. It's like but people see it on social media and they think it's the truth. It's like, leave the fucking guy alone. He's out there doing the best he can. He's singing. Be happy. You're a Motley Crue fan or whatever. Fucking go enjoy the show. Fuck off. Don't fucking slag the guy. He's up there. You're not. It's easy for people to hide behind their computer screens and just talk shit. And like I said, I've seen him do it to Vince. I've seen him do it to Axl. I've seen him do it, Mike Reno, Joe Elliott, anybody, that struggles with their weight. It's, just people are vicious. And, it's like, okay, cool. If that makes you feel better, go ahead. But you know what? There are a lot of, and you know what? That's 1 out of 10 people. It's not everybody. So, yeah. But I did the book for lots of things, for me, for other people, for whatever, to tell my version. And I say this thing about the book and the Tesla stories and all that. That's how I remember them.
Right.
That's not necessarily how Jeff's going to remember it, or Tommy, or Troy, or Frank, or Dave. That's my memory. And if Jeff wrote a book tomorrow, he'd tell the same story, and it'd be a different story, a different viewpoint. So that's the beauty of doing that, is that, look, I hope the other guys, do a book. I heard Troy was maybe going to do a book, and Frank, whatever, or, Tommy should do a book. He certainly got a lot to talk about,
Yeah. And like you said, a cathartic experience, and just letting things out. I prefer books sometimes that aren't written by the biggest guy in the world. You know, everybody has a story. It's not how famous you are, or it's
No.
about what your story is, and your life is an interesting story. And of course, there just happens to be a multi-platinum rock band in there as well, and so that's there for the fans if they want that.
And my dad truly was the Milkman, by the way.
Yes, yeah, and that I should say that a lot of people think it's just a title. That is not just a title. Your mother had an affair with a milkman.
That's absolutely true. He was the Milkman.
Mhm.
Dropped a little cream off and Brian Weed at the same time.
When did you first realize, and people can read the book, but when did you first realize that your dad was the milkman?
I think they told me when I was about 8. My sister told me. Yeah, she's like, your dad. I thought my godfather was my dad.
Mm-hmm.
She said, no, he's not. It's this guy Norm. He was the milkman. I'm like, oh, okay. Wow, that was confusing. And honestly, my last name is my dad's name was Norm Ferrand, not Wheat. Wheat were my other 4 brothers and sister. Mm-hmm. So that, but in 1962, my mom gave me that name because it wasn't cool to be having illegitimate kids, and so but I'm still Brian Weed. I mean, whether or not I'm
of course, yeah.
Not,
did you have, and again, people can get the book, but did you have a relationship with your biological father at any point?
It was a kind of estranged relationship. It was weird. He died, and I didn't go to his funeral. Now I wish I would have, but again, when you're young and bitter and pissed off, you don't. But you get older and you go, I didn't realize maybe what he was going through, or this, that, and the other. I'd met him a few times. I'd spent a little bit of time with him, not much.
Did he still deliver the milk?
No. After
he got my mom, ridiculous.
The story goes, after he got my mom pregnant, he got in some kind of car wreck or something, and he cut out of California and went to Illinois, and then I think he started driving a truck or something. But when he was in California, he was the milkman.
Yeah.
So it wasn't long after my mom got pregnant that he cut out.
Yeah. Was there anything in the book, Brian, that you said, I can't tell that story?
No, not really. I mean, I pretty much told all the stories there are to tell. I mean, listen, do I need to go in depth about some of the sexual shit? No. Right. It's like that. People.
Well, you're not writing a kiss and tell book or a groupie book.
No. But as far as like the real life shit, it's all covered.
Yeah. And sometimes maybe you have to make a composite or change a name. Occasionally.
I did a little bit of that. Yeah. Absolutely.
Occasionally, you have to be careful and protect people who are, private citizens. I suppose.
Yeah. And listen, like I think there's a story about a big rock of cocaine or something that went in a toilet or something. And I asked Frank, I said, "Are you cool if I talk about this?" He said, "Yeah." Otherwise, I would have left it out. You know what I mean?
Right.
So, no, listen, I didn't do the dirt on anybody.
No.
But the funny thing is that Tesla we used to party, mm-hmm. and people, they always thought we were kind of squeaky clean, but we weren't. We just weren't. That wasn't the story. There was not really a story on Tesla. When you look back on that, we were like kind of like just these guys that if they were standing next to you, you might not even know who they were, right? But you knew the songs. But we were just as fucking crazy and did crazy shit as anyone else from the time period. We just never talked about it, and it was never really mentioned in the press. And we wanted to more focus on the songs, and let's face it, that wasn't the sell back then. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, it's most people were partying in some capacity. Piercy tells me the story about how Rat was just as crazy as Motley Crue and doing just as much, if not more, insane things. We just didn't make sex tapes and film it and write books about it and
No,
talk about every aspect of it.
no, and I think some things need to be left private, you know. And listen, like I said, when they write the sentence about us, I think it'll be about Five Man Acoustic Jam, and I'm really proud about that. You know, or the fact that we made these kind of honest rock and roll records. I don't need to talk about that, but the one cocaine story was pretty funny.
Yeah,
You know,
well, you have to have something in there. Yeah,
and I
and
would have, if we wouldn't have flushed it in the toilet, I would have did it back then.
I'm sure.
I was the last one to discover drugs in that thing.
Yeah, I can imagine. Did the guys?
I came to the party at the 11th hour, and they were all like, we were falling apart, and then I'm like, hey, this is cool.
Right.
You know, hey. So
Yeah, you saved some energy. Did the guys read the book?
I don't know.
Never came
I
up.
don't think Frank's read the book. I think Jeff's wife has read parts of the book to him. I don't know if Tommy has. We never talked about the book.
Mm.
And I don't know if Troy's read the book.
Yeah,
So I don't know. You know, I don't think they want. Maybe they don't want to. You know, who knows? I don't know.
Do you send them copies?
No, I think that'd be too pretentious. That'd be like,
Yeah,
oh, hey, read my book. You know, no. It's like if they want to read the book, they can read the book.
Mhm.
If you know, but no, I you know, and I didn't ask them permission. Well, I did in a roundabout way. Jeff said, say whatever you want. It's all true. Right? I asked Frank specifically about stuff. Troy knew I was writing the book, you know, and I was honest about me and Troy's relationship, you know, about how we butt heads a lot, you know. I don't love him any less. I love him as much as I love any of the other guys in that band. I just told the truth, you know. And when he writes his book, he can spin it how he, you know, from his point of view. You know, I wasn't, you know, some people said, oh, you were a little harsh on Troy. I wasn't harsh on Troy. I just told that story from my point of view. I was no more harsh on Troy than I was Tommy, right? You know, and I wasn't even harsh on Tommy, you know.
Yeah, it's interesting, the dynamic of the personalities that have been in your life, and they're in the book, obviously. These people you've spent most of your adult life with, and even some of your childhood, you know, going back to City Kid in the old days. And it's interesting. And I find the dynamic now interesting as well. When we were at the Key West show, I noticed that you guys split the dressing rooms. You and Jeff were sharing one, and then the other three guys had the other. Is it a personality dynamic? Is it a smoking dynamic?
No. I mean, the thing that I don't think people realize is that we spend so much time together.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we're on the bus all the time. You know, we're on tour all the time. You like to have a little bit of separation. And me and Jeff, I mean, listen, I could share a dressing room with anyone in that band. There's not like there's anyone that doesn't like anyone. But we all have different energies and we all have different vibes and stuff. And, you know, me and Jeff work well together in that dressing room. You know, Dave and Frank and Steve are good over there. Sometimes I'm with Frank. Sometimes I'm with Dave, you know, but more than not, I'm with Jeff. But it's not because no one likes each other. If there's only one dressing room, we're all in the same dressing room.
All together, right.
Yeah. It's not like, oh, I can't be in the dressing room or put me down the hall because I can't stand that fucker. If that was the case, we wouldn't play.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's not like, oh, this is just a business arrangement. I mean, we're on the bus. We don't take hotel rooms on days off. We live on the bus.
Yeah.
You know, because economically, it just makes more sense. You know?
How hard is it on your health?
Well, I tell people that I love playing the shows, right? And if they could invent the thing from Star Trek where they beam you, I'd play 300 days a year, right? Just beam me to the gig and then beam me home. The traveling's hard on me, you know. and you're on a bus with 11 guys. The only personal space you have is your bunk, and you're up and down. I don't sleep well on a bus. I don't sleep well on tour because the stopping and the going, and as soon as the guy hits the brakes, I used to sleep good, but I was fucked up all the time. I used to sleep good on the bus. And, now I've been sober for all these years. It's difficult for me to sleep. It's hard for me to turn off my mind. I'm in a pretty good space. The last couple of years I've been pretty healthy. I remember there was about 5 years ago where my health was, questionable. And I told Eddie Trunk, this might be my last tour. I may retire. And, I kind of got some new doctors and got on a different regimen and stuff. And so I'm feeling a lot better. I can't tour like we used to, where we used to do 8 months, out of the year. We're all older, so it's okay. I'm good. You know what? I'm in a good place. Thanks for asking.
Yeah, well, it's good. For the healthiest person in the world, touring is not easy. By today's standards, things are different, especially if you're doing fly dates and things.
Yeah, those are hard, man. I gotta tell you, those fly dates, those guys that do just go out and do the weekend warrior shit, that's hard on you, man. That is, and that's why we try to do at least 10-day or 2-week runs, 2.5-week runs, because at least then you get kind of in a routine where you're doing that weekend warrior shit. You got to get up and get on a plane and then go play. And that's brutal, man. That's hard. That's really hard on you.
I'm on a plane every single weekend. It's not just one plane. It's 4, 5, 6 planes every week.
Well, then it's fucking brutal, man.
And Stephen Pearcy, he's 66 years old. He's had his knees replaced. He's beat cancer. It's amazing that he's up and on that plane, and then the next plane, and then the drive, planes, trains, automobiles. So it's good to see that you found a way to make it work for you with your health.
Yeah, no, I'm good, man. There's a good balance these days.
Vegas residency is perfect for what a great place.
Come on out, man. There's still tickets. There's a few tickets still left, and it's going to be cool. And if you're a Tesla fan, I think you're really going to enjoy it because it's going to be different every night. So, and we got some cool merch coming out. The other thing, I think what I should tell you is we got a live album coming out soon. Somewhere around that time, there's a new lyric video for which has one of the tracks live for Time to Rock. So there's a new live version of that mixed and a lyric video, and then there'll be a live album coming out and maybe a couple studio tracks later this year. So we're not slowing down. We're probably going to do 60, 65 shows this year. So, we're moving and grooving.
Yeah, which is great to hear, and to make up for some lost time that we all lost. The links are in the description, Tesla's website. You can check out the tour dates. For you, Vegas will be great. You get to sleep in the same bed for a few days and play the same stage.
Funny thing about that is most of the guys are staying at a hotel, right? But since we're there 10 days, we do 5 shows, and we're there 10 days. I'm staying in Airbnb.
Yeah, feel at home.
Yeah, so I'm just at home. I can control what I'm eating. Just, I don't like hotels. That's one thing I don't like about touring. I don't like hotels at all. I don't like getting off the bus, having to take my luggage up, down. I don't like hotels, man. Don't like them at all.
And they're unpredictable because you don't know what you're going to get, even a nice hotel, and you don't know who's in the room next to you or over you.
Or who's been in the bed before. If I was extremely wealthy, right, if I hit the lottery tomorrow, I would buy a jet and 5 houses and spread them across the country, and every night I'd be home. That would be my ideal world.
Yeah. When
I would not stop playing, I wouldn't stop. I'd still do exactly the same. The only perk I would buy me is a jet and 5 houses to where you could go, okay,
conveniently located.
Sacramento, play these shows, fly home. Right? Every night be home with my wife and dogs and in my own bed. That would be a perfect world.
When Paul McCartney, your hero, plays Las Vegas, he flies his private plane. He has a tour bus that takes him from the private plane to the venue. And when that show's over, he's gone. He's not spending the night at any hotels.
No,
Here
no,
it is.
no.
It's
Yeah, he is my hero. Him and Jimmy Page.
Yeah, and it's fortunate. I know you've met Jimmy Page and got to know him, but what about McCartney? Have you met Paul McCartney?
Well, I'll tell you a funny story. Jimmy's actually a friend of mine.
Mm-hmm.
So me and Jimmy have been friends for a long time. We'll just leave that there because we have a very private relationship. But Paul McCartney, I've met several times. Doesn't know who I am. And just recently, I was in London in October. And I had my wife and my friend Marvin with me. And Marvin had never been to London. So I'm taking Marvin all around London, showing him. So I went to MPL, which is Paul's office in Soho Square. And I'm showing Marvin, because I had to meet the guy from the merch company in Soho. So I figured, I was going to meet this guy for lunch, I'd show Marvin Paul McCartney's beautiful deco building. And I sit up in that window up there, Marvin. That's where I met Paul McCartney the first time in 1987. Me and Frank were at Geffen doing interviews. We came through the park. We looked up. We saw him in the window. Frank said, "Holy fuck, there's Paul McCartney." I said, "Yeah, I'm going to wait here. I bet he comes down." He did. I met him. I took a picture with him. That was the first time I met him. So I'm telling Marvin all this stuff, right? And in Paul McCartney's like third floor office window, I collect these statues from this deco artist named Dimitri Chaparis. There's a Chaparis statue. It's on Wings' Greatest Hits. If you look at that album cover, you'll see this statue. Well, I have one of those. I have a recast, right? Paul McCartney has the original Chaparis. Probably worth a couple $1,000,000, right? So I'm showing Marvin that. And so he's like, "Oh, cool." So we sit down on the park bench because it's a park. And we're turning away from his building. And I'm looking for directions to the Soho Hotel where I'm supposed to have this meeting. And Marvin says, "Brian, there's Paul McCartney right there." I said, "Oh, shut up." And I look up, and 10 feet in front of me is Paul McCartney taking pictures of his building. So I look up and I said, "Hey, Paul, how you doing?" He said, "Hey, man, how you doing?" And I stood up, and immediately the phones went away because he doesn't want, I know that. And he came over and he started talking to me and my wife and Marvin for about 10 minutes. And I said, "Hey, how you doing, man? I've met you several times. One of your wardrobe person was one of our good friends, Allie." He went, "Oh, yeah, yeah." And I told him I knew his drummer, Denny Sywell, from Live and Let Die Wings area and stuff. And I said, "I just saw you in Syracuse this summer. You were amazing." And he went, "I was only amazing in Syracuse." I said, "Well, that's not true. I saw you in Sacramento too, and you were amazing there. But you must have got lucky that night, right, Paul?" And he thought that was funny, right? And then so Monique says, "Paul, we have that same statue you have." And he went, "What statue?" He said, "The statue." I said, "The Chaparis up in the window." "Chaparis? What do you mean Chaparis?" I said, "That statue, the one that's on Wings' Greatest Hits." He went, "Oh, that's what that thing's called?" Now, Martin's had this since 1973, right? Mm-hmm. He said, "Oh, I didn't know. Linda bought me that." He goes, "See, I learn something new every day." Amazing. And it was great. But I'll tell you the funniest thing of that meeting was my friend Marvin's from Texas. He owns a chain of catfish restaurants, right? Mm-hmm. And he talks with a real Southern drawl. And so Paul stuck out his hand and he said, "Hey," I said, "I'm Brian." He said, "Hi, Monique." And Marvin goes, "Marvin Morris, Abilene, Texas." And Paul went, "Paul McCartney, Liverpool, England."
Oh, great.
And so, yeah, I've met Paul several times, but he doesn't know me from Adam. But he's so nice. Dude, he was there, no security, no mask, no nothing, standing in the park like you or I.
Yeah, and what a great experience! What a great experience, especially with people who are your heroes, to get to have those moments of time with them, and they're good. He's funny.
Yeah, and the cool thing is, like, if you meet your hero and you're let down, it's a real drag. I've been so lucky that my heroes I've met and became friends with one of them, a couple of them, and I haven't been let down. So I'm real fortunate, blessed.
Yeah. They say be careful of who you meet, and you've been fortunate.
I'd be so crushed if I met him and he was a dick, right? It's like, but every time I've ever met him, he's been so nice.
When I was a kid in New York City, you know, you walk through New York, you see everybody at some point. When I was a kid, I bought a guitar because of Johnny Ramone. He was my hero of punk rock music, and I ran into him in the street. He spent 2 hours talking to me in front of his building. You know, anything I could have wanted to know, and formed a nice little relationship. Known him for years after, and I told my guitar teacher at the time, is Nick Bocott from the band Grim Reaper, who ran Marshall amps for a while there, and he told me, he goes, "You're so lucky that you got to meet your hero," and he was great. He goes, because my heroes weren't so friendly, you know, and that is an occupational hazard when you meet people of a legendary status that you might not have experienced. You'll treasure those Paul McCartney stories forever.
Yeah, I mean, listen, man, I'm such a lucky guy, you know. I mean, to have achieved what I have with my career and met my hero and become, friends with a couple of my heroes, real friends. Man, what more can a guy ask for? A milkman's kid from Sacramento, you know.
Yeah, I think that sums it up. Son of a Milkman is available now. Link in the description. Come out to Las Vegas. You'll have a great time if you're a Tesla fan. This is the place. Vegas is great right now. The city's up and booming. And if you can't make it to Vegas, Tesla is on the road this year. You will find the city next to you.
Yeah.
As I said, don't sleep on your favorite bands. Get out there and support. So
Yeah, absolutely, man. It's been
Brian,
a pleasure to be on your show, buddy.
thank you. I'm so glad you were here, and I look forward to seeing you in a month or so.
Yeah, let's hang out, dude.
Sounds good. Okay, thank you everyone for watching.
Show me around Vegas. I want to
I'd be
find a
happy.
good vinyl store. You got a vinyl store there?
We have a few. I will show you. Sebastian Bach will be there while you're looking, but we will we will find it.
That's all right. I like
John,
Sebastian.
he's great, but he's a big vinyl guy here in Vegas. He's out vinyl
Oh, so am I.
shopping. Yeah, well, we'll go. We'll
Let's
go
go
check out.
vinyl shopping one day.
Yeah, you'll have time. We'll do it. All right. Thank you, Brian. Thank you everyone for watching. Please subscribe, and we'll see you